Colleagues, this meeting of the Special Committee on Canada-China Relations will come to order. Monsieur Bergeron, vous avez quelque chose?
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Bergeron, you had a statement? Yes, I actually have a question about the document that I've been waiting for following our last meeting. I'm waiting for the translation.
Elle est faite.
It is done, and it will be delivered to your office today. It wasn't too soon. Thank you.
And that's very good timing, actually. Je vous remercie, Monsieur Bergeron, parce que...
Thank you, Mr. Bergeron, because it gave us the necessary time to have all of our name cards up. Thank you.
Colleagues, in this meeting, the first hour will be officials on the bilateral relationship, and the second hour, officials on trade. There will be 10-minute opening remarks for each panel, and of course, each will be followed by a round of questions from members. So this morning we have from the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, Martha Morgan, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Paul Topel, Assistant Deputy Minister, Asia Pacific, and Cindy Timmershuisen, Director General, International Security Policy Bureau. Please proceed. Ms. Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My colleagues and I are very grateful today to have the opportunity to give you some background on China and Canada's relationship with it. Let me start by acknowledging the preoccupation I know that we all have with the coronavirus outbreak in China and the impact this is having on Canadians. The safety and well-being of Canadians at home and abroad is of paramount importance to the Government of Canada. Canada is deeply concerned by the current outbreak of the novel coronavirus, particularly regarding its potential impacts on Canadians in the Wuhan area. And Global Affairs Canada is working closely with the Public Health Agency of Canada and supporting their engagement with Chinese health officials to provide a timely and coordinated response to the outbreak. 156 Canadian citizens have contacted Global Affairs Canada for departure assistance. The government has secured a chartered aircraft and is now working on the diplomatic front with officials in China to obtain the authorizations to proceed with an assisted departure. This latest crisis is occurring after a long period of instability in Hong Kong and, as you are well aware, a difficult year in Canada-China relations. Canada's relations with China are complex, with both opportunities and challenges. Now more than ever, Canadians are asking questions about what China's economic growth and governance model means for their future prosperity, their security, and Canada's place in the world. The committee is taking on important work at a crucial time. A common understanding of where the People's Republic of China is going and how it touches Canada's national interests will make our policy better. The committee will decide what issues to examine in closer detail and will have the opportunity to hear a wide variety of views from experts and stakeholders. Ambassador Dominic Martin, who you will meet next week, will provide an excellent view from the ground in Beijing. Les gouvernements du Canada et de la Chine ont ou du moins ont eu just...
The governments of Canada and China have had, up until the end of 2018, close relationships in many sectors. Several departments or government organizations have had a partnership in one form or another with their Chinese counterparts or have a mandate in which China occupies an important place. Global Affairs Canada is playing a leading role in the coordination of the Government of Canada's approach towards China to ensure consistency in our relationships. I am here to present a general context, and I invite you to take it into consideration when you develop your agenda.
For many years, citizens of Canada and the People's Republic of China have built bridges between our countries. While October 2020 will mark 50 years since we established diplomatic ties, many years before that, Canadian missionaries helped found leading medical schools in China, and Canada traded wheat to stave off famine across China in the early days of the People's Republic. It is remarkable that Canada and Canadians, despite our ideological differences, reached out across the Pacific to support the people of China even without an embassy to support them. With the founding of diplomatic relations, Canada launched a broad official relationship, including a bilateral aid program that wound down in 2013. Through our aid and engagement, Canada supported China's modernization and opening up. Canadians made substantial contributions to reform in the nonprofit, legal, education, and agricultural systems over the decades. For example, Canadian programming helped Chinese farmers adapt to the WTO as China completed its accession process. Reform was critical to China's success in alleviating poverty. According to the World Bank, China has lifted 850 million people out of poverty. China's poverty rate fell from 88% in 1981 to 0.7% in 2015. In 2018, China's GDP was 174 times the size that it was in 1952, and per capita annual income had surpassed $10,000 US. As China's economy opened and grew, Canadian trade and investment in China did as well. China is now Canada's third largest trading partner after the US and the EU. While still only accounting for roughly 5% of Canadian exports, Canada's trade with China has grown rapidly in recent years. In 2018, two-way merchandise trade between Canada and China reached $103.2 billion, including $27.6 billion in Canadian exports and $75.6 billion in imports. Comme mon collègue Steve Verheuel l'expliquera.
As my colleague Steve Verheuel will explain during the next meeting, Canadian exports towards China fell during 2019. Canada mostly exports commodities to China under the direct surveillance of the Chinese government. As we have observed, Canadian canola exports can be vulnerable to interventions by the Chinese government, which contravene the rules and standards of international trade.
Relations with China have not grown not only in exchange of goods, but more broadly. In 2018, service exports to China were valued at $7.4 billion, while imports from China were valued at $2.8 billion, a 6.1% year-on-year increase in two-way services trade. China is Canada's third largest source of tourists and its second largest source of international students to Canada. But as China's market grew, so did competition for access to it, and China itself has become more competitive. China's economy now accounts for nearly 1/3 of global growth each year. Even at modest rates for China of 6% annual growth, China adds the equivalent of an Australia to its economy every year. China has enormous potential to contribute to resolving common global challenges. Indeed, when it comes to global problems such as climate change and health, China, by virtue of its population and economic weight, will continue to play a significant role in tackling our collective problems. And as a permanent member of the UN Security Council, an increasingly important economic and military power, China's influence on Canada's international security priorities cannot be ignored. On December 10, 2019, Parliament passed the motion establishing this special committee to examine all aspects of the Canada-China relationship. December 10th is also International Human Rights Day, and December 10th is also the day in 2018 when Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor were detained arbitrarily by authorities of the People's Republic of China. December 10th, 2018 is a day that changed Canada's outlook on its relations with China. Canada and many of our partners were shocked and saddened by the detention of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. We condemn arbitrary detentions and sentencing. Coercive practices, especially those that target innocent individuals for political ends, undermine the norms and principles that are the foundation of international relations. International partners have also condemned the detention and the practice of residential surveillance at a designated location that falls outside of any recognized judicial process for many detained in China. We have also raised concern about the failure to recognize the residual immunities of Michael Kovrig, who is a colleague and friend for many in Global Affairs Canada. These detentions reflect broader features of China's governance that pose challenge to human rights and the rule of law. The Communist Party's increasingly authoritarian grip on power, restrictions on civic freedoms in Hong Kong and abuses of human rights in Xinjiang, coercive diplomacy against individuals and countries that threaten the Chinese government's interests, and threats to democracy and democratic institutions. The Government of Canada has not shied away from disagreements with the Government of the People's Republic. We have called for the immediate release of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, as well as clemency for Robert Schellenberg and all death penalty cases at every opportunity. And as an absolute priority for the Government of Canada, Canadian officials have worked tirelessly to advocate for these cases bilaterally and multilaterally, while remaining consistent in our policy approach to bilateral relations with China. Nous avons toujours fait part de nos profonds.
We have always shared our deep concerns about restrictions to the rights and freedoms of Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities, whether it be as part of our bilateral relationships or as part of multilateral fora, such as the Human Rights Council. We have asked Chinese authorities to uphold freedom of religion of all Chinese citizens in Xinjiang and in Tibet, whether they are Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, or Falun Gong. We have asked them to put an end to efforts to try and silence human rights defenders. We have asked for Taiwan to be able to truly participate in international fora where there is a great need to act internationally, such as the World Health Organization.
And on these issues, Canada is not alone. Like-minded partners have added their voices to call for release of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor and an end to arbitrary detention. Canada enjoys the good company of many democratic nations in our call for an end to human rights abuses in China. In the face of these challenges, however, we must also recognize our deep people-to-people ties, including the nearly 2 million Canadians of Chinese descent. Exchanges take place not just between governments, but between companies, students, tourists, artists, and athletes. Governments play a facilitating role in these people-to-people exchanges, which are an important foundation for progress. Looking forward, the relations with China will continue to be complex, and Canada will need to chart a path that allows us to protect Canada's interests, to work with China on issues of mutual benefit, and to continue to press for justice and human rights. Les entreprises canadiennes profiteront de la croissance.
Canadian businesses benefit from Chinese economic growth, which is becoming the highest in the world, as well as the changes in its value chain of goods and services. Whether it be to deal with worldwide solutions for climate change, financial systems, or pandemics, it is necessary to leverage China's participation. Multilateral cooperation starts with establishing solid bilateral relationships.
It needs to enhance our understanding of China, not only to adapt to the opportunities it presents, but to better defend the core values of democracy, human rights, and freedoms that Canadians enjoy at home and abroad. This can only happen, I believe, with enhanced people-to-people ties and ongoing engagement, all of which starts with the return of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor and clemency for Robert Schellenberg. The work of this committee presents an important opportunity to review all aspects of the Canada-China relationship and to chart a path forward that takes into account both risks and opportunities. Je vous souhaite beaucoup de succès.
I wish you a great deal of success in this important work, and I will be pleased to answer your questions. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Morgan.
Say, Madame.
And we'll start with Ms. Alislev.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being here and recognizing just how critical at this point in the global world, as well as our own, Canada's China relationships are. I'm wondering if you gave a great overview, but I'm wondering if we could specifically sort of target on understanding exactly what actions have occurred in the last 14 months, what direction you've been given by the government, and what actions you have taken over the last 14 months to prevent the further decline of Canada's relationship with the People's Republic of China.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me say that over the past 14 months, our priority has been to resolve a number of the challenging issues that have arisen in our relationship with the People's Republic of China, starting with the detention of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. The government of Canada is deeply concerned by the arbitrary detention and arrest by Chinese authorities of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, and we continue to call for their immediate release. We have worked very closely at all levels to convey these messages to the government of China, most recently with the meeting between Minister Champagne and his counterpart, Foreign Minister Wang Yi, in Japan, shortly after Minister Champagne became Foreign Minister. We have engaged many other countries to assist us in making these making these representations, and 14 other countries have supported us publicly and even more privately.
And can I ask you on that front? 14 countries have agreed to support us publicly. Now, that's fantastic, and we want their support, no question, but what specific action have you taken to translate that support into quantifiable action? What are they specifically doing in terms of actions to make that support and have the arbitrary detention withdrawn?
Mr. Chair, the countries who have engaged in support with us have made both public and private representations at many levels to the government of China on these issues. In addition to these, and in addition to this, I would also like to discuss a little bit the trade side, because that has been one of the issues that has emerged in the last 14 months.
And that would be great, because in actual fact, we understand that our largest ally and partner, the United States, is currently signing an agreement with China, and yet we haven't seen any action for Canada's support on the arbitrary detention issue. Can you speak to that, please?
Absolutely. The government of the United States has spoken out against the arbitrary detention of Mr. Spavor and Mr. Kovrig, Mr. Chair, and there have been resolutions in the House of Representatives, for example, decrying the detention of these two individuals. So all of our
actions
allies
speak louder than words. So what specific actions? I mean, certainly not signing a trade agreement when that would have been a prime opportunity. Are we concerned that our relationship with the U.S., where perhaps they're not advocating the way that we need them to on this issue?
Mr. Chair, the United States is equally concerned as we are with the arbitrary detention and arrest by Chinese authorities of Mr. Kovrig and Mr. Spavor. They have supported us both publicly and privately through diplomatic channels in making representations to the government of China about this arbitrary detention and this arbitrary.
And would you say that progress
conditions.
has been made as a result?
Mr. Chair, this is a complicated issue. Clearly, and it involves delicate diplomatic relationships, and it is not entirely within the control, as you would know, of the Government of Canada. We have made best efforts across a variety of diplomatic channels and working with our allies, including with the United States, to put pressure on the Government of China around the arbitrary detention and arrest of these individuals, as well as to seek clemency for Mr. Schellenberg.
And then you were going to mention about the trade aspects and how we are utilizing the trade aspects to also improve our relationship with China. Can you speak to that?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Let me just say, in terms of the trade aspects of the relationship, as you're aware, The current canola seeds market issue with the government of China has had a big impact on Canadian farmers. And the government of Canada is taking action through the rule of law and the existing processes that exist
But
in
if
order
I
to
might,
resolve these
you've
problems.
already outlined how they are not necessarily abiding by the rule of law. So what recourse do we have when they're not playing by the rules as specified?
Canada will continue to pursue through the WTO, which is the established mechanism to resolve trade disputes, which reinforces our commitment to the rule of law and using established processes in order to resolve these disputes.
Thank you very much.
Colleagues, there's two sides to this. On the one hand, I'd like to ask members to allow the witnesses to answer the questions. At the same time, I'd like to ask the witnesses to try to be concise and focus your answers on the question that is asked. And next we have Mr. Fragiskatos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being here and for all the work that you are doing on this beyond complicated issue, to be frank. Deputy Minister, I believe my colleague, although she didn't elaborate on it, was criticizing the government for not going ahead and signing a free trade agreement with China, which in her view would have made getting over the current impasse that Canada finds itself in, the current challenges, easier. How long do free trade agreements take to negotiate, especially when thinking about a country like China?
My colleague Steve Verheul will be very well placed to give more detail on trade agreements, but I would just say that they generally take quite a while to negotiate, and particularly where the partner is a complicated and large partner such as China is with Canada.
So I will certainly be putting that question to Mr. Verheul as well. However, I think it's fair to say that it would take longer than 3 or 4 years. Is that...
Depending on the country involved and the complexity of issues, it could easily take that long.
Okay. There's also a context here, I think, and you alluded to this in your remarks, but I wonder if you could go into that. We're dealing with a superpower. Canada is a middle power. And there's another superpower, obviously the United States, which has ongoing disagreements on a range of issues vis-a-vis the Chinese. Canada, it seems, is caught in the middle, and our position as a middle power conditions or dictates our foreign policy choices on a good day, but especially when we're caught in between these two great powers. I think this obviously has a lot to play. It really is important to pay attention to. Can you go into that, Deputy Minister? The challenges of Canada navigating what is really a difficult time in the relations between the U.S. and the Chinese as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's been a lot written about the strategic rivalry between a status quo and an emerging power, and this might make a great study for the Committee for Future Study. There are many views to take into account. As a middle power, Canada has relied strongly on international rules and norms in institutions and to protect businesses and to protect our economic interests, as well as to promote peace and stability. And we believe that that is the strongest framework within which we can operate as a middle power.
And Canada is not unique among liberal democracies in facing challenges with the Chinese government. Is that correct?
No, that is absolutely correct. You will see during your investigation by the committee, I'm sure, Mr. Chair, that there are a number of countries who have had challenges in their relationship with China, and that in many cases these challenges can take quite a while to resolve.
Can you go into, because I think, although we did hear about it in the questioning that Ms. Salislev carried out, the building of a coalition by the Canadian government to engage like-minded countries, liberal democracies in particular, when it comes to this issue. But can you speak to how important that is and how that was cultivated? Because putting together that kind of effort, that sort of partnership, that doesn't happen overnight. That happens over time, and I think over time, it can yield very good results. But can you speak to that?
Yes, Mr. Chair. We have really benefited from the support and strength of many like-minded countries on this issue. And this has required on a significant effort at all levels of the Government of Canada, starting with the Prime Minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and all of our officials, both here in Ottawa and in Beijing. Paul has just informed me that we made over 1,000 démarches to other countries in order to secure support for us and for Mr. Spavor and Mr. Kovrig over the last year and a bit. And you can see that our efforts have been very intense and at all levels, and that countries really came forward of their own volition as well, because this is recognized as a particularly challenging situation and very inappropriate.
I have about 1 minute left, and with so many Canadians concerned about the coronavirus, I think you've seen a government respond very quickly in a very organized fashion when it comes to this. And you did speak to this in your remarks, but can you go into once more elaborating on what exactly the Canadian government is doing to bring Canadians home from China and to ensure their safety once they arrive in Canada?
Thank you. The Public Health Agency of Canada has the lead in coordinating the domestic efforts to manage the outbreak of the coronavirus. And the Global Affairs Canada is focusing on the well-being of Canadians in China, travel advice, and also the well-being of our consular and diplomatic staff. As Minister Champagne announced yesterday, the Government of Canada has reserved a plane to repatriate Canadians from Wuhan, which is at the epicenter of China's coronavirus. And we will be working with the Public Health Agency of Canada, Health Canada, and our American colleagues to ensure that Canadians are protected upon the return of those individuals and that things are handled appropriately from a public health perspective.
So a coordinated response. Thank you very much.
Carlos. Et maintenant, c'est Monsieur Bergeron.
And now Mr. Bergeron has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I would like to thank our witnesses for this presentation. I admit that I was sincerely expecting, and I'm not saying this in any pejorative way, I was expecting some sort of statement that was going to just be general and saying that given that Chinese officials are probably closely watching what's happening today, therefore I want to thank you for your presentation. Earlier, we were talking about the comparison between the difficulties Canada is currently experiencing with the People's Republic of China and the difficulties that other Western democracies might be having with that same country. I am not sure that this is a good comparison in the sense that Canada traditionally has maintained relationships, excellent relationships with the People's Republic of China, whether it be the influence of a man like Norman Bethune, whether it be because of food aid that you mentioned in your presentation, whether it be thanks to the intervention of the current Prime Minister. Our relationship has always been excellent with the People's Republic of China up until the unfortunate incidents of arresting Meng Wanzhou, which made Canada the battleground for two superpowers in their negotiations. That is why the issue of American government intervention seems to be an interesting one. I think that the Americans are defending above all their own interests and not ours when it comes to the negotiations that they are currently leading with China. Consequently, I believe that they used Canada in their own interests by asking Meng Wanzhou to be arrested and to be extradited to the United States. President Trump confirmed that by stating just a few days ago that we just need an agreement with China to maybe drop the extradition request of Meng Wanzhou. I would say that this reveals the difficult situation we are in. I will ask my questions in a series because I know that we have limited time. You have indicated that the control of the Communist Party on the Chinese state is constantly increasing, in spite of the fact that Canada has changed its position regarding China, where we always put forward the issue of human rights. We decided in the 90s to emphasize the development of trade relationships, which has had considerable success, as you mentioned. But there's been very little success in improving the situation of human rights. And we've observed that. Given that control by the Communist Party over the state, my first question is, will Canada's relationships be limited to the state, or are we trying to maintain relationships with the Communist Party? My second question has to do with the arrest of Meng Wanzhou. From the time that she was accused of violating American sanctions against Iran, which don't apply at all in Canada, what justified this arrest? I know that now the issue is before the courts, and that unfortunately we can no longer look into providing a political answer, which excludes an exchange of prisoners, which would undermine Canada's assertion that it is a state that respects the rule of law and would invite any country in the world to imprison Canadians for this type of maneuver. And how do you explain the impact of these months of absence of a Canadian ambassador? Is this not proof for Chinese authorities that essentially the arrest of both Michaels wasn't all that important to the Canadian government, given that the ambassador's position was left vacant for months during this crisis? You have 1 minute and 15 seconds. I will try to answer all of the questions. First of all, Mr. Chair, I agree that we've had excellent relationships with China for many years. We still have good person-to-person relationships in the areas of trade. We have a lot of relationships there. This is a very complex relationship. It requires contacts and the development of relationships at every level of society and government in China. China is a country that is very important on the world stage. Our relationship with China is very important for all of us. When it comes to the issue of Ms. Meng,
legal obligations in this case. We are working in accordance with the Extradition Act and our bilateral extradition treaty with the United States. And I believe that the committee will be receiving briefings from the Department of Justice officials on these matters as early as next week. This proceeding is currently before the BC Supreme Court, and will be up to an independent judge to resolve. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. And now we have Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the witnesses for their very thorough presentation. The relationship, of course, with China is very long-lasting, and I think to the extent that Canada was amongst the first to help the recognition of China and bring them into international relations in a different way, one would assume that we have built a very strong relationship over the many years, 50 years coming up. So in that context, I'm a little concerned that we have the China's ambassador to Canada, who back in May spoke of the relationship as being at a freezing point and being concerned that Canada ought to respect China's major concerns and stop the moves that undermine the interests of China, which seems to me to be a rather aggressive statement, given the context of the relations with Michael Korvik and Michael Spavor and the other issues that the tariffs put on Canadian goods and the stopping of canola and other goods. how is it? How do you see that kind of statement? Do you know what they're saying when they say stop the moves that undermine the interests of China? Is that something that that concerns you, that they would take that view?
Well, Mr. Chair, I cannot speak obviously for the government of China, but clearly they have taken a very strong public position on the case of Madame Meng, and that public position has been quite firm. And I would invite you to to invite our ambassador from China to Canada to seek further insight into the views of the government of China. What I can tell you is that we are very concerned with the current situation, and particularly the arbitrary detention and arrest by Chinese authorities of Mr. Kovrig and Mr. Spavor.
Yeah, of course, and we all are, and that's probably one of the motivating forces that got this committee going in the first place. And I want to ask you about the efforts that have been made. You've indicated that over 1,000 démarches have been issued by Canada. I find the number of 14 countries supporting Canada to be a disappointingly low number, in my view. You've indicated they have come forward on their own volition. Does that does that mean that we are not constantly seeking support from other countries, or is this what is the strategy here?
Mr. Chair, we are constantly seeking support from other countries, and I'll pass this question to Mr. Topple to provide more context and detail on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are a number of countries that have publicly expressed, and a number that have expressed a desire to do so in a private bilateral way with China. And therefore, in total, we take great comfort with the number of countries in totality who have indicated in their engagements.
How many would that
with
be?
China. Well, there is quite a number, and we can give you a list if the committee would prefer afterwards. But we also want to, besides countries, there is the Secretary General of NATO, there is the EU, and there is the G7 foreign ministers, who have all, in addition to those 14 countries, publicly have committed an expression of disappointment and consternation with the arbitrary detention of Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig.
And is there any additional strategy other than a public or private expression of concern?
As Deputy Morgan indicated previously, those are diplomatic sensitive relations that are being done, and I think in the context of these public proceedings, and with the desire to ensure the protection of the individuals concerned, I would not like to elaborate further.
And can you say whether there's any, and I don't wish to, unfairly contrast the one detention versus the other, but is there any additional leverage that applies, given the fact that one of these individuals is in fact a Canadian diplomat on leave? Does that offer any additional ability to put pressure on China to become more sensitive to this whole, not just Mr. Korvig's detention, but the entire approach? Is that of any assistance at all?
Mr. Chair, I can assure you that one of the issues that we have raised consistently with the government of China is the residual diplomatic immunities of Mr. Michael Kovrig, who was one of our colleagues at Global Affairs Canada. And
I would think that other countries, most other countries, not just 14 or whatever number you have on your side, would be concerned about that too, because that's something that interferes with international relations generally in dealing with a country like China, and China, assuming China wants to be part of the world community.
Diplomatic communities are a very important part of being able to engage in the very important bilateral relationships that we have around the world, and that all countries have around the world with other countries. And it's very important to be protected. It's very important for those relationships to be able to exist and to be safe. And I think that there's general and widespread agreement on that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Mr. Workington.
Thank you, and I appreciate all of the witnesses for coming. Of course, we're trying to better understand the government's view of the relationship between Canada and the United States. We understand that it's complex. I think the vast majority of Canadians understand that it's complex, but I think you'd forgive Canadians for wondering if we're not moving into the incoherent point in time. I think Canadians do want clarity with regards to the government's current position. Mr. Topple, you made national news this last summer when it was revealed that you had reached out to two former ambassadors to ask them to run future communications through the department so that they not speak freely, but run those communications through the department. What prompted you to make those calls?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. In my capacity and all my colleagues at Global Affairs, we are constantly engaging with former heads of mission and retired foreign service officers in countries because they bring a valuable source of knowledge and expertise.
It was reported that you had instruction to do that. Who instructed you to make those calls?
As I said before, we initiate on our own as part of our stakeholder engagement.
I asked for you, to bear with me. I do only have 5 minutes, and I have several questions. Were you given instruction to make those calls?
Thank you for the question. As I said before, it is I engage and I continue to engage with former heads of mission.
Do you do it without instruction?
And it's unfortunate that in that exchange, with the intent to exchange on complex issues to better inform and keep former heads of mission and former diplomats abreast of current circumstances. It's unfortunate that there was a clear a misunderstanding and communication in that regard. And there was at no time any pressure put on officials to prevent any former Canadian diplomat from speaking freely and publicly. In fact, we welcome their input, and we welcome that input to us directly and in a public manner.
So you were not instructed to make those calls by anybody other than it was regular communication from
As
your
I said
office?
before, I continue on my own volition to engage with former heads of mission to seek their input and feedback because they are a rich source of intelligence.
So your intention was just to hear from them, not to convey any messages.
As I said, we need their input as long as we engage with academia and business for the development of the advice that we give to
Would you be able to
ministers and the
provide
government.
Would you be able to provide your notes from that time frame to this committee?
I'm sorry?
Would you have taken notes during those phone calls?
No, there were no notes taken.
Okay. In terms of the 14 countries that Canada has, there's been statements that, of course, we have been undertaking an effort to build some allies with other countries. The incoherence comes that in October of 2019, Canada sent a delegation of soldiers to engage in military games in China. As a matter of fact, it was during the election campaign. This is at the same time when, of course, Canada was seeking to work with to negotiate the release of the Michaels. But China's embassy saw the delegation coming to China differently than maybe your department may have. As a matter of fact, Beijing's embassy said that Canada's military, having sent a big delegation to China, is more evidence that the Asian power is not losing friends. So, as a matter of fact, they viewed that as a demonstration that Canada is developing a stronger relationship. Was there any concerns with regards to sending that delegation? What was the message that was intended to be sent by sending the delegation?
Mr. Chair, as the most populous country in the world and the second largest economy, China plays a role in almost all issues of interest to Canada. The relationship is complicated. It is multivariable. We have strong person-to-person ties. We have strong trade relationships. And we will continue to engage with China on multiple fronts while we work very hard to resolve the bilateral challenges that we have in front of us.
I don't think that answers my question. Why did Canada send that delegation at a time when things were so sensitive, when it was clearly a demonstration of friendship at a time in which you have already described that things have worsened, that the relationship has changed. Why was that decision made?
Mr. Chair, there have been many visits and many relations that have been pursued with China over the course of this time period, and we continue to build the relationships in the areas where we can work together with China and where we can work to our mutual benefit, while continuing to put a focus on resolving both the personal and trade issues that are serious that are in front of us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Workington. Ms. Zan.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Deputy Minister, for your testimony today. As you have outlined in your remarks, you really paint a really complex picture of China and Canada's relationship with China. And as my colleague from the Bloc Québécois also noted, all of the help that Canada has been to China is very important in our relationship, in relationship building, and in helping to work across the waves with folks on the other side of the ocean who are struggling when they were struggling. And now it's nice to see that they're doing well. My question for you is regarding the human rights issue. We know that Islamophobia has been rising around the world, and it's very concerning for many of us. So the Uyghurs in particular are on many of our minds. And I'm just wondering what in particular our government is doing to try and help them in talking with our partners in China about their detention as well as the detention of our Canadians.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Canada raises human rights concerns at every opportunity and at every level. Our advocacy for human rights in China includes bilateral dialogue, joint or unilateral public statements, interventions in multilateral forums such as the Human Rights Council of the United Nations, monitoring and reporting, outreach, participation in events that raise awareness and support communities whose rights are at stake. For example, our mission reporting from Beijing and our outreach with Uyghur communities informs our approach and our understanding of the issues that are and abuses that are happening in Xinjiang, and that includes making joint statements with other countries. I would like to reinforce that we have had a very consistent approach to these issues. We raise our concerns for a wide range of human rights violations, and we encourage others to join us at every opportunity that we have.
Thank you very much. The cultural past of China is very rich and very deep. So is the current impasse with our negotiations regarding the two Michaels and Robert Schellenberg, is this affecting our relationship with our cultural exchanges? And how do you see culture and sports as a way of bringing us together and trying to continue to create a strong alliance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think this goes to a broader question, which is, that there are many areas, promising areas, for us to engage constructively with China. Culture and sports are clearly one of those, but we also share many other common interests. A growing middle class of consumers, for example, in China seeks high-quality health products from Canada. There's an opportunity there for some of our cultural industries as well to exchange with China and to build understanding and build bridges between us. Whether it's sports or students or exchanges, we have many opportunities to build mutual understanding between Canada and China, and also to work together on tackling challenging issues, which will require the active participation of China in order to make headway.
Thank you. And you mentioned that climate change is something that China is also working very carefully to try and help us halt. Can you elaborate a little bit more? And are we working together between the two countries on any specific projects to deal with climate change?
Yes, I would put climate change in that category of issues where obviously China being the world's second largest economy with 1.4 billion people needs to play a very constructive role. Canada has engaged China on environmental issues and climate change for many years. We co-hosted a meeting with China, Canada and the EU on climate change recently, and so we continue to engage with them at all levels on that issue, which is so important to all of us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And Mr. Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for our witnesses for being here today. Ms. Morgan, just one quick question. Your department estimates there are how many Uyghurs being detained currently in the People's Republic of China?
Have to get back to you on that question.
Could you provide that number to the committee, please? Thank you. Does the department have on the People's Republic of China a country strategy? And if so, could that be tabled to this committee?
Mr. Chair, as the most populous country in the world and second largest economy, China plays a role in almost all issues that are of interest to us. It's a complicated relationship. It has opportunities and challenges, and we manage it in a multifaceted way with domestic, bilateral, and international considerations.
I have a limited amount of time. Is there a country strategy in the People's Republic of China, and could you table it to this committee by February the 3rd?
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to provide more information to the committee about our approach to addressing the many challenges and opportunities with China.
How do you propose doing that?
Well, I'm happy to provide more information on our approach.
Could we have the China strategy?
The issue of a country strategy, I'm not sure we would use that terminology, Mr. Chair, but we're happy to provide more information on our overall approach to China and the various aspects of it.
So you could table that document?
We will happy to provide more information on that,
by
yes.
February the 3rd.
When is February the 3rd? Next week?
Yes.
We'll provide that as soon as possible, Mr. Chair. Let me get back to you on the timing.
All right. The ambassador's in next week, so
yes,
before
understood.
That, do you have a global power strategy that you could table to this committee that would look at the China, Russia, United States?
We do not have a pre-written global power strategy, Mr. Chair.
Could you table a record of all ministerial travel to China since 2015 by the end of the day, February the 3rd?
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to look into that, and we'll also look into how quickly we can provide it. That could be a little bit complicated to pull together.
You mentioned in your remarks that, I'm not sure it was the government, Canada, yourself, that you were shocked and saddened by the detention of our two Canadian citizens. Saddened surprises me. What about outraged?
Mr. Chair, I think that we have been very clear on this matter, that the arbitrary detention of Mr. Kovrig and Mr. Stavor is unacceptable and is our top priority to resolve this issue.
Would you call them hostages?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Spavor and Mr. Kovrig have been arbitrarily detained by the government of China.
They've been, pardon me?
Arbitrarily detained.
But not illegally.
Arbitrarily detained.
Arbitrarily detained. So an accident. It kind of just happened.
No, Mr. Chair.
So what do you mean by arbitrarily?
Mr. Chair, I think I've been very clear on this issue that the government of Canada is very deeply concerned by the arbitrary detention and arrest by Chinese authorities of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. And we have been working tirelessly to address this issue.
Right. Do you really believe the United States government is equally as concerned about the detention of to Canadians that they would be taking the same posture to Americans? They're equally concerned about this as we are.
Mr. Chair, the United States government is very concerned about the arbitrary detention of Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig, and they have been consistently supportive of our position with this on this issue.
Okay. Mr. Is it Tophill? Just yes or no. Yes or no. Were you instructed to make those the outreach that my colleague referred to?
Mr.
Just
Chair,
yes or no.
I initiate and engage with former heads of mission.
Okay,
every
thank
day.
you. I'm going to give my last 15 seconds to my colleague.
I'd just like to state for the record that at no time did I suggest that Canada should have a free trade deal with China to resolve the consular cases. That was not what I said, so I want to make sure the record says that. Thank you.
Thank you. I make it 10:28 and 10 seconds, so Mr. Oliphant, I'll give you a minute and a half.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the officials, and thank you for your work on this complex thing. When I look at these trouble spots in the world, there is a toolkit of interventions that can be done, from extreme to nothing. And it would seem to me that Canada has chosen a middle road in our interventions, which are strong, but keeping the door open for diplomatic engagement. So we have not done certain extreme activities that some in the opposition have called for, nor have we simply laid down and said that nothing's going on. Is that a correct understanding of the approach that we're having at this time?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think that is a reasonable interpretation of our approach. We need to act firmly. We have condemned the actions of the government of China, both in terms of arbitrary detention and in terms of trade actions. That being said, we have diplomatic relations with the government of China, and we need to use those relationships to advance our interests and to seek resolution to the problems that we have.
Appearance today, and you're now excused. While we're waiting for the next set of witnesses, if I can, before I let you go ahead, Mr. Harris, if you don't mind, I want to inform the committee that members have been calling the clerk to try to find out what the committee's regular time slot would be, and that's been difficult because there hasn't been a time when everyone can be available. So we may have to come to the point when we choose a time, despite the fact that not everyone is available for that time. But we can take a moment, perhaps at the end of this meeting, if we have time to discuss this. Secondly, that in terms of upcoming meetings, as members may know, Tuesday, February the 4th, from 10 to noon, we'll have a briefing with Consular Affairs and Justice. Wednesday, February the 5th, from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m., we'll have a briefing with Ambassador Barton. Mr. Harris.
Thank you.
Could I ask that we suspend the meeting for a moment so the witnesses may leave and then and allow the table?
I've already indicated the witnesses are excused.
It would be normal custom for us to suspend for a moment so we could thank the witnesses.
Mr. Chairman, I have a point of order.
I would like to hear from Mr. Harris on his point of order.
This is relevant to the witness. I just wanted to confirm that Mr. Topol will provide the list of countries to the committee.
Who did?
I think you said you would, so that is something that we would like you to do, or I would certainly like you to do.
Great. Ms. Morgan, I understand you want to correct something?
Oh, just, I think I had an incorrect in my speaking remarks about the number of Canadians impacted by or seeking to assisted departure from Wuhan, which is now at 196.
Thank you.
Put that on the
Thank you.
record. Thanks.
Okay, the witnesses are excused, and then we'll suspend for a few moments.
Okay.
We're ready to get started. If members want to take their seats. And we have a set of witnesses now from the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, Mr. Steve Verhoel, Assistant Deputy Minister of Trade Policy and Negotiations, Mr. Doug Forsyth, Director General Market Access, Ms. Mr. Dwayne McMullen, Director General Trade Commissioner Service Operations, Monsieur Francois Rivet, Executive Director Greater China, and from the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food, Mr. Fred Gorel, Assistant Deputy Minister, International Affairs Branch. Mr. Verhoel, would you like to begin your presentation? I believe we're going to have a 10-minute opening remarks from the panel. Please.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, we are pleased to have this opportunity to update the committee on recent challenges facing the Canada-China trade relationship and ways in which the government is seeking to improve conditions for Canadian exporters. Following my remarks, we would be happy to provide further details and answer any questions that you may have. As you heard earlier, Canada's trade and investment relationship with China has grown substantially as the Chinese economy has developed. China is our third largest trading partner, accounting for nearly 9% of Canada's trade with the world and about 5% of our total exports in 2018. China is also now the third largest source of foreign direct investment from Asia into Canada, with the stock of Chinese investment in Canada valued at $16.9 billion in 2018. This growth in bilateral trade and investment led Canada to explore ways to improve the environment for Canadians to do business in the Chinese market over the past decade. However, as you are well aware, the deterioration of Canada-China bilateral relations has affected the policy environment. From January to November 2019, our exports to China fell by some 14.7% compared to 2018, driven by a drop in canola seed, wood pulp, and nickel shipments. But I should point out that part of this is clearly due to the economic slowdown in China as well as the deteriorating relationship. It has also changed the way some Canadians do business with China. Some Canadian businesses have reported increased scrutiny of their exports at the border. Others have seen a slowdown in sales as Chinese importers have become reluctant to bear the risk of political uncertainty. And in March of 2019, China suspended shipments from two major Canadian canola seed exporters and increased inspection of all Canadian canola seed exports to China, citing an alleged discovery of pests. This move effectively blocked a large portion of Canada's largest agricultural export to China. Canadian canola seed exports to China have since fallen by around 70%. Our priority since has been to seek a science-based solution to fully restore market access. We are working closely with the governments of Alberta, of Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, as well as industry partners. On September 9th, 2019, Canada requested formal consultations with China at the World Trade Organization after trying to resolve the issue through bilateral engagement. Those consultations took place on October 28th and provided us with an important opportunity to request further information and clearly voice our concerns with China's restrictive import measures. At Canada's request, Canadian technical experts met with Chinese plant specialists in Beijing from December 18th to the 20th to discuss China's canola seed quarantine and inspection methodology. We are assessing the information provided by China to determine next steps. We expect further technical discussions to take place in the coming months. The government remains engaged with Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, and our industry partners through our working group on canola, chaired by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada and the Canola Council of Canada. This collaboration will continue to be important as we collectively work to fully restore market access. It is important to consider, however, that the challenges faced by some Canadian businesses in China are not necessarily new or exclusive to Canada. Since China's accession to the WTO in 2001, many international partners have expressed concerns over certain elements of China's economic and trade policies. This includes a variety of issues that affect Canadian exporters. These include a lack of transparency and inconsistent application of rules and regulations to extensive subsidies for domestic industries, and the large role of state-owned enterprises in the Chinese economy. Nonetheless, China's increasing importance as a consumer market and trading partner continues to present unrivaled new opportunities for business and growth. This means that we cannot turn our back and walk away from the trade challenges we face with China. If we do, our competitors would gladly take up Canada's current market share. Indeed, even though political tensions may have affected how some Canadians do business, we will continue to trade, exchange investments, and engage with China. This creates a need for Canada to consider how we engage constructively with China. How do we address barriers to doing business and other concerns while thinking strategically about our trade and investment relationship with China and the rest of the Asia-Pacific region? In this regard, one notable consideration for Canada is the ongoing trade dispute between China and the United States. Since 2018, China and the United States have engaged in a series of escalating trade actions against one another, including levying tariffs on $455 billion US worth of exports and launching a number of new WTO dispute settlement cases. This fight between the world's two largest economies has fostered uncertainty and put a damper on global economic growth. It has also shifted how countries do business with China, the United States, and with the rest of the world. As China and the United States raise tariffs on each other's goods, they have shifted their exports and imports to other trading partners. Over the past year, we have seen China divert its exports away from the United States to Europe, as well as to Vietnam, Korea, Mexico, Australia, and Canada. It has also increased its imports from other countries in areas affected by the trade dispute, which has led to new opportunities and increased exports for certain Canadian sectors, such as lobster and wheat. As you were aware, on January 15th, Canada and the United States signed a Phase 1 trade deal intended to address some of the concerns that have led to their trade dispute. The deal includes commitments in areas like agriculture, intellectual property, and technology transfer. China pledged under an unprecedented expanding trade chapter to restore imports to levels before the trade dispute. It also committed to purchase an additional $200 billion worth of American goods and services over the next 2 years, a 90% increase over 2017 levels by the end of 2021. However, the agreement does not address a number of key concerns from both sides, such as the complete removal of U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods and structural changes to the Chinese economy, like industrial subsidies and support for state-owned enterprises. For Canada and the rest of the world, the Phase 1 deal presents new considerations for our future trade and investment with China and the United States. It presents a challenge to the free and open rules-based trading system by prescribing a managed trade outcome that would likely cause global market distortion and trade diversion effects. This could potentially have negative implications for certain Canadian agricultural sectors that compete with the United States in the Chinese market. On the other hand, the diversion of U.S. exports to China could create opportunities for Canadian businesses to diversify their exports and replace losses in China with increased market share elsewhere. Similarly, any systemic changes to the Chinese regulatory environment spurred by the deal could benefit Canadians as well. We are reviewing the agreement and considering the complex web of implications for Canadians. Throughout this process, we will continue to work with Canadian stakeholders and our provincial and territorial partners to fully understand the impact of the U.S.-China deal. In conclusion, Canada's trade with China will evolve as the Chinese economy grows and reforms over time. Our interests and priorities will also shift with major developments in how the world trades and engages with China. That is to say, even as Canada focuses on finding solutions to our own tensions with China, it will be important for us to keep in mind the impacts of changes in other countries' relationships with China on Canadian interests as well. To echo a point I said earlier, it will be important for Canada to find ways to enhance and leverage our business and people-to-people ties in order to better understand China and advance our bilateral interests. This includes tapping into China's vast economic opportunities while at the same time defending our core values of democracy, human rights, and freedoms. This concludes my opening remarks. We are happy now to answer your questions about Canada-China trade. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Mr. Workington.
Chair, thank you, Mr. Verhoeven. I appreciate you and your team coming. I know this is a difficult time for you, as it is for every exporter in the country that exports to China. In terms of the current trade deficit, can you quantify the current trade deficit between Canada and China? Do you have those numbers?
We have the current trade deficit. At this point in time, if we look at 2018, our exports to China were worth about $27.6 billion. Our imports from China were $75.6 billion. So obviously the difference between the two is the deficit.
Right, and that's 2018 numbers.
That is 2018.
Would you assess, and maybe you don't have the numbers, the current numbers. I'm thinking with the current the straining of the relationships, yes, specifically with regards to canola, if those have significantly impacted that global number.
Yes, we have seen some drops. We do have data for January to November 2019, and we have seen a drop of our merchandise exports down 14.7%. Imports from China have decreased by 0.4%, and our overall bilateral trade has seen a decrease of 4.4%.
Obviously, the issue with regards to canola is a major concern to the people that I represent. The issue with regards to pork was also a concern to those people that were pork producers. Mm-hmm. The pork issue seems to have been resolved almost magically. It all of a sudden was no longer an issue, and I'm sure that we didn't see what happened behind closed doors, but it's a lot of people's sense that the necessity for that to fill the consumer market in China was necessary. It was necessary for the Chinese to reopen that pork market because it was necessary to meet the demand of the Chinese people. Mm-hmm. Is that the view of the department?
Well, I think the issue on pork and beef was more of a legitimate issue surrounding export certificates, that we did not see any kind of political interference in that particular issue. But I will ask my colleague, Fred Gorell, if he has anything to add to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Relative to that, I think it's important that, as Mr. Verhoeven said, there was illegitimate certificates that are being used that were not from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency and were not relative to Canadian product. Over a period of 4 months, we provided an exhaustive amount of information to the Chinese to make sure they had complete confidence again in the Canadian system. And then on November 5th, they did reissue first removed all the barriers. I think it is important just in the context too, and I think people are aware of it. China is also working with the African swine fever that has devastated their pork industry in China as well. So there is a huge demand. Clearly, the Canadian product has very good quality and reputation, so they normalized the trade as of November. And I can say that since that time, the exports of pork have gone up significantly, and it's a very healthy trade.
That's very good. That is good news. In regards to canola, obviously canola seed has been identified by the Chinese as being a concern because of an alleged pest. Obviously, that pest wouldn't have an impact on processed canola products. Is there any current limitation on export of processed products, oil, etc., from Canada to China?
I'll let Fred respond to that as well.
Thank you. A good question, and a little bit of the context. As Mr. Verhoeven has said, that 2 of our major exporters have been suspended for exporting canola to China, but other companies are allowed to export. Our exports on canola, and I think when we talk about canola, the key thing is we're looking at oil, seed, and meal, the 3 constituents of it. All of them are down, just for a number of reasons that we talked about, but they're looking at various pests, and we've had a number of visits, and in December, as Mr. Verhoeven said, I was actually with the delegation, we've gone through what they're looking at from pest point of view. Our position is, as you've identified, through the processing of canola seed at a processing plant, it would, if not completely, significantly reduce any of the risks that they're discussing.
The government has tried to assure Canadians that the $250 million that they sent to China for the Asian Infrastructure Fund would open new export opportunities and investment opportunities for Canadians into China. Does your department have any evidence that there has been an increase in investment by Canadian or openness to Canadian investment or exports because of the gift that the government of Canada gave to China in the form of the the $250 million investment or gift to the Asian Infrastructure Bank?
Yes, I'll ask my colleague Francois to respond to that.
So we don't have any specific examples, but we know that Canadian companies are actively looking at opportunities that might be available through the AIIB, as well as obviously the other international financial institutions, and as well the Belt and Road Initiative. So Canadian companies are looking for areas where they can benefit from what China is doing to build infrastructure in the region.
But no evidence of any.
Well, we're speaking to companies that are pursuing opportunities, but I don't have any specific examples.
Mr. Workington, Mr. Dubois.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank our guests and to thank them for their presentation. Mr. Verhul, you spoke in your speech of the difficulties that Canada is experiencing in its relationship with China. You also spoke about trade, where there are many more inspections of food items. You also added that those inspections are not just happening with Canadian products, it's happening with products from other countries as well. I would like to know, after the agreement signed with the United States, has China continued to maintain this level of inspection of American products?
Can I ask you to respond to that?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. I think that inspections for all products from all countries have increased, but because of the African swine fever, for example. However, it's not the same situation for every country. Thank you. Now, when it comes to canola, which we've just discussed, we're aware of the problems. However, are there other products that we trade with China where the situation is changing? For example, wood. There's lobster as well. But is wood experiencing changes in its exports?
We have not seen any real impact on our exports of wood and most other products. In fact, we've seen some gains in some products in modest ways, but outside of the ones that have been mentioned, we've not seen a significant drop.
OK, d'accord. Et dans le contexte actuel.
In the current context, I know that we're on a trade level and the coronavirus is very recent. Are you seeing any impact of that on trade that we have with China? Can we discuss that?
Alors, le coronavirus.
The coronavirus started becoming a very significant problem for China just a few weeks ago. Measures taken to prevent the spread of the virus have taken on more importance with every day. They're closing borders, canceling flights. Markets are closed in China. Movement in China is restricted. This will definitely have an impact on international travel, and Canadians and other nations that do business with China will be limited in their ability to conduct trade with China, and it's limiting China's own ability to function normally. Thank you. Last question. I'd like to talk about the agreement signed between the Americans and the Chinese. I would like to know if there are opportunities for us here in Canada with that agreement that was signed. Is there any way for us to benefit from it?
Well, at this point, Mr. Chair, it's still fairly early days. The agreement is not yet come into effect. I think it comes into effect on February 14th. So we will have to see how the trade actually starts to take place. But much of what China has undertaken to do in terms of accepting commodity purchases from the U.S. Will tend to open up markets in other countries. So we do anticipate that there will be some opportunities created by the U.S.-China agreement, but I think we'll also see some of our own interest in China perhaps see some negative impact as well.
OK, merci. Une minute? OK, d'accord. Merci.
Thank you. I would like to know, we're following the news. We know that for a certain time we did not have an ambassador to China. Ambassador Macaulay had been recalled. Now we took action to find a successor on a trade level. Are you seeing improvements in our trade with China?
Well, I would think it would that it's difficult to see a direct relationship between the appointment of the ambassador and an increase or an improvement in the trade situation. I think it's safe to say that we have seen somewhat of an improvement in the relationship in the sense that we have a dialogue now, that we have an ambassador on the ground there, and we're hoping that that will start to pay dividends in the future as time goes on.
Thank you. Merci.
Chose certaine pour faire du pouce.
To follow up on Mr. Dubourg's questions, perhaps we'll see positive impacts. Perhaps we would have seen those positive effects more quickly if we had acted more quickly. Now, just out of curiosity, Mr. Rivet, what is China broadening? Broader China includes Hong Kong and Taiwan. We're talking about continental China, which is China without the neighboring islands. Broader China includes those islands. Does that include the islands that China is claiming or that China built? Unfortunately, I cannot answer that question.
Je m'excuse.
I'm sorry? I'm an expert in trade. I'm not an expert in territorial issues with China. But broader China, does that include that? No, it does not include those territories. Excellent. I know that we've been engaged since the 70s in an accelerated process to broaden trade relationships with China in the hopes that this will bring changes to the social and political landscape of the country. I know that the second aspect is not directly concerning us, but that is the overall goal we are pursuing. In the context of this race towards liberalizing trade relationships with the People's Republic of China, there was a premature idea put forward by the Prime Minister during his last visit to China, which is a free trade agreement with China, which was not welcomed by President Xi Jinping. Was the Prime Minister's statement prepared ahead of time? Was the ground prepared with Chinese authorities? And why was such initiative put forward by the Prime Minister at that time?
Mr. Chairman, as mentioned, we have been engaged in exploring improving commercial relations with China for many, many years. We successfully negotiated foreign investment protection agreement with them. A number of years ago, we explored in depth the possibility of a potential free trade agreement negotiation with China. A number of meetings were held in 2017. We went through a scoping exercise to determine what such an agreement could look like, what each side's interests would be, and did a significant amount of analysis in that direction. As it turns out, we were not able to come to an agreement to initiate free trade agreement negotiations, and given current circumstances, obviously the timing is not right now, but we continue to have an interest in further exploring our capacity for further growth in the Chinese market.
Ça, je m'en doute bien, mais ma question est plutôt à savoir.
I have no doubt about that, but my question is, at the moment that the Prime Minister made his statement, what was the situation of our approach with Chinese authorities? And why did the approach break down at that time?
Well, I think the main challenge we had in moving forward with the free trade agreement at that time, and this is, to recall, is back in 2017, is that we had different perspectives on what we were looking for in a free trade agreement. China was looking for an agreement that would favor the kinds of interests they had, which was primarily to expand their exports to Canada. We had interest in getting further information and some constraints on their use of state-owned enterprises, which are very difficult to track in terms of their competitive advantages that they have. We saw very little interest on the Chinese side on issues like government procurement, which were of interest to us. And China showed little interest in having any kind of meaningful discussions on issues like labor and environment, which were also priorities for us, as they are in any free trade agreement. So we were not able to converge on the kind of negotiation and the kind of agreement that we would be looking to achieve.
Dans une vie antérieure,
In a previous life, I represented the riding of Verchères, which includes 2 significant steel mills. At the time, our concern had mainly to do with steel and steel dumping by the Chinese of inferior quality on the North American market. With the new free trade agreement, our concerns have to do with the dumping of Chinese aluminum of inferior quality in North America. I would like to know what your views are on those concerns.
Yes, it's quite true that we and many other countries around the world have had concerns with excess production of both steel and aluminum coming out of China and resulting in distortions on the world market. You will recall, Mr. Chairman, that the U.S. initiated so-called Section 232 measures on national security basis against imports of steel and aluminum from around the world. We similarly took actions, not of that kind of provision, but we have a number of anti-dumping and countervailing duty actions against imports of both steel and aluminum coming from China. I think the number is some 67 different actions that are in place. And so we have had extensive discussions with the U.S. and with Mexico in the context of the agreement we reached about wanting to ensure that the North American market was not going to be distorted by unfair imports of products that were at artificially low prices from in particular China, but some other countries as well.
c'est terminé.
Mr. Harris.
Ça passe vite en bonne compagnie.
Things go quickly when you're in good company.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for your presentation. I have a question regarding the canola situation, and you outlined some of the steps that we're taking and the timelines that are involved. Are you confident that the pace of these developments is in keeping with the normal process of trying to resolve questions of this nature? It seems to me that are we going through the motions here, or is there a genuine effort to resolve this?
Mm-hmm. Great.
Thank you for the question. I think, no, we're not satisfied with the pace. I think to make it clear, when the suspensions of our two largest trading companies came in effect in March, we asked for face-to-face meetings right away. So for a period over the summer, we had been asking for face-to-face meetings to have the technical dialogue and exchange so we could actually science-based, evidence-based to refute it. After we had WTO consultations, and I'll defer to my colleagues if you have questions on that, in October, they did agree to have a face-to-face, and we did have one with a rather large, sizable group in Beijing in December. We have had progress. They have been, I would say, positive but difficult conversations, and we have agreed to meet in February or March of this year to further the discussions. But I would say under normal circumstances, we would have preferred a much more proactive approach on the Chinese, but they have been engaging, and we do feel that there is room for conversations from a scientific, evidence-based approach so that we can understand if their position is considered legitimate or not.
So it seems to me that there's some evidence that this action, even based on the objective pace of the discussions, that this action goes beyond the actual concern for the product itself.
I think Deputy Morgan said it very well. The relationship between Canada and China is very complex. There may be other factors involved when decisions are made, but we're very much sticking into, I would say, our swim lane, as I would say, relative to the technical aspects and the merits of it. And I would leave that for others to decide.
It'll be coming up soon to a year since these measures were taken. At what point would you want to go forward with the WTO, the next step, in terms of seeking a resolution?
Well, that is an ongoing analysis that we do in terms of when it is the right time to take that further step. Part of the issue is that there are some ongoing technical discussions happening, and if we feel that there is some forward movement in those discussions, then that could be a quicker way to resolve the problem than going through a lengthy WTO dispute settlement panel process. So we will have to, at some point, make the judgment as to whether those technical discussions are productive enough that we should continue down that track, or whether we should feel that it is now time to move on to a WTO panel request. So it's an ongoing assessment. We'll continue to assess that as time goes on. But we also want to make sure that through these technical discussions, we're also collecting all of the evidence that we need to ensure that we can put forward a very strong case at the WTO.
On another matter, the Professor Wendy Dobson, who's also a former senior public servant, of course, in Canada, from the Robin School of Business, has suggested that some of our relationship with China could be increased or improved in terms of business interaction by developing multilateral rules of conduct in telecommunications and also internationally accepted boundaries for cyber warfare. Now, I know you're not in the cyber warfare business, but it has to do with dealings with the relationship between technology and exchange. And of course, we do have concerns about the issue of Chinese companies doing business in these fields. Certainly Huawei is the number one consideration on this list. Is there any consideration being given to working on this issue from your perspective, from Canada's perspective, to try and improve that situation?
Well, there are a number of aspects to that issue. There are negotiations ongoing at the WTO now that involve electronic commerce. So we are pursued in trying to advance those negotiations, and so far we are making some progress on that front. If you're getting into some of the other issues that have more to do with security of information and issues that aren't related to trade, then that's outside of our field, of course, and would have to be pursued elsewhere. I don't know if anybody else on the panel has further information on anything outside of the trade sphere.
Well, just to add that we are mindful of the issues at stake and the risks, and we are constantly assessing how Canada can mitigate the risk of that are inherent to those sectors.
I'll pass.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Harris. Ms. Kusi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much to all of our guests for being here today. Of course, in the chamber right now, we are going through the debate and the ratification of the new NAFTA. And so I'm interested to have your perspective in terms of the U.S.-China relationship and if this harmed or hampered, the United States as they went to go negotiate NAFTA, the new NAFTA with Canada and with Mexico. If we could just have your thoughts on that, please. If their relationship, their trade relationship, China, the U.S., if that helped the U.S. or harmed the U.S. as they came to Canada and Mexico to negotiate this new NAFTA.
I don't think that we could say that it harmed U.S. efforts to negotiate the new NAFTA, other than through the fact that they were occupied with a number of different negotiations taking place at the same time. So in terms of their level of attention and focus on different negotiations, there may have been some issues in work capacity. But beyond that, I don't think so, other than I'd point out that in certain chapters that we negotiated with the U.S. and Mexico, and I'll mention state-owned enterprises as one of those, much of the discussion within the negotiations of that chapter related to how could we best set an example for the world on how we have disciplines on state-owned enterprises, and then that could perhaps be taken as a precedent for other free trade agreements. And I think the U.S. Was thinking of countries like China when we were negotiating some of those elements.
Thank you. You've spoken about the value of trade between China and Canada for tangible commodities. That's really what we've focused on here today, things like canola and pork, as well as services. But can you quantify the value of the new intangible commodities like IP, R&D, data, and others? And how are we beginning to monitor regulate, and protect those valuable assets with respect to China?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Outside of the tangible trade between Canada and China, as the honourable member has observed, there is considerable intangible trade. For example, in the education sector, there are over 140,000 Chinese students studying in Canada, in communities all across our country. And not only are those students bringing economic benefits to Canada, they're learning about Canada and how our democracy operates and how our society operates. Their intangible trade and tourism from Chinese tourists. We have a science and technology collaboration agreement with China that supports science and technology collaboration in areas where we think it meets Canada's interests, as well as Chinese interests.
Thank you, but perhaps you could expand upon it. How are we protecting ourselves in the new digital economy, please?
Well, as the Mr. Chair, as the previous question talked about work underway in the WTO, multilaterally with all countries to figure out what are ways to operate in this new environment. Specifically with Canada, we have a number of mechanisms, but in particular with Canadian companies that are looking to do business in China, we give them extensive advice about not only the benefits of that business in China should it work, but also some of the risks that they need to be taking into account, for example, with respect to their intellectual property, other competitive aspects, and ways that they can deal with those risks to protect their business, to be successful in China, and not have that trade work out badly for them.
Thank you very much. Mr. Verheul, do you think that export decreases are retaliation for Kovrig and Spavor?
We've talked about the canola and pork, and there's been talk about other sectors that have weakened a little bit. There is no clear link between those downtrends and the arrest of Meng Wanzhou. Mr. Chairman. And there have been other sectors, as Mr. Verl has mentioned, that have gone up. So not all sectors have experienced a downturn. There's only a few of them. And the
Then
link-
how do you account for these decreases? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Oliphant.
Thank you for this, and thank you for your work. I want to ask about the concept of trade diversification, and both trade diversification toward the People's Republic of China and trade diversification away from the People's Republic of China, and whether or not there is a move in the government. This is not part of the work I do, about how we help Canadian industries buffer various geopolitical issues that are going on. So it seemed to me that we've looked towards China for increased trade and investment because of certain factors in the world. And then we've looked at other parts of the world because of the complicated relationship with China right now. And how much of that, is there a shift in government direction? Is there a move? This relates obviously to the United States, it relates to Canada, Europe, it relates to TPP, and how that is shaping your work, and what it is you may be looking for this committee to offer advice on.
Mr. Chair, in terms of trade diversification, the government has no policy of trade diversification away from China. We would like to grow our trade with China, and as we've heard from many of the questions, there are concern from members about how do we increase our canola trade, how do we increase our our trade in forest products, how do we increase our trade in all range of commodities, in all range of products and services, and our policy is to try to increase that trade. By so doing, our trade will be diversified. Now, for individual companies, when we talk to them from a Trade Commissioner Service perspective and we look at their global strategy, we encourage diversification as a general principle for them, because the data is very clear that companies that are more diversified in their trade are more successful. They pay better wages, they grow faster, they are less likely to fail in a downturn. So a company with very diversified sets of markets does much better. And one of a goal of policy in our efforts is to help companies then reap those benefits of diversification by helping them to do that in whichever market they are interested in.
So last year I met with the BC cherry growers, met with the president, looking at the growing market for BC cherries in Asia, and the comparative advantage we have because of the different growing season we have compared to other markets. And they did issue concern about whether or not they were having all their cherries in one basket, whether they should be looking around. Is this something your department does? Do they help a specific industry like that look at advantages? And also, are you exercising any cautionary advice for them with respect to China?
Thank you. It's actually a really good question. And I would say cherries, eggs, or whatever in one basket is never good. And our industry is aware of that, and we're aware of it too. So just to complement or supplement my colleagues' comments, we obviously want to grow our industry and market in China, but we are also looking at other markets in the region. So diversification, emerging markets such as, we could look at expanding still in Japan, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, et cetera. So we very much are doing that as well. Part of that is to manage the risk. So if we do have all the cherries in one basket, that is a problem. We do that as part of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, working with Global Affairs, as well as all of our embassies abroad. We do look at opportunities for cherries and other products where we can maximize it. But at the end of the day, it's the industry's choice of where they want to go. They will give us what they would think are their priorities. We work with the other governments to do that. But at the end of the day, they will decide where they actually decide to put their products.
In the last 4.5 years, have we expanded our trade footprint in China in terms of our investment, in terms of human resources or engagement? Is that something that we have done, and is it bearing fruit? I'm on that theme.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So yes, we have added resources on the Trade Commissioner service side. We've added some 25 resources in the past 2 years. We have 3 consulates on the mainland, in addition to the embassy, and 10 trade offices, which were expanded over the years, and it has certainly helped increasing the number of Canadian businesses going to China and help open doors for them. And our trade, if you look at over the past 10 years, has gone up significantly with China, both for large companies and SMEs.
Oliphant and Mr. Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks everyone for appearing this morning. Just a point of clarification. Could you just give us the number of the actual trade deficit? I know you provided the import exports, but what's the number you have on our trade deficit with PRC?
So looking at 2018 numbers, our exports were 27.6 billion. Our imports were 75.6 billion. And so a total trade of $103 billion.
So what's the trade deficit?
So the deficit will be the difference between 75 billion and 27 billion.
So I got 48 billion. Is that yeah. Okay? I know it's simple math, but there were questions.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a calculator.
Long math. Thank heavens we don't always need a machine for that. Mr. McMullen, you were saying that it's the policy of the government of Canada to increase our trade with China. Did I understand that correctly?
We have no policy to decrease our trade.
To decrease
with China.
Okay.
But we are trying to grow our trade with every market.
Is it on the trade side? Is it business as usual with China, even with everything that's happening right now with the detention and the WTO and
yeah.
you know the picture,
Mr. Chairman? So there has been. We've talked about a chilling, increased scrutiny at border points. It's not across the board. It's anecdotal. Some Canadian businesses are still doing well, and even within sectors, the experiences are different. So people are looking at what's happening in China, business people, and saying and reassessing their risk appetite for China.
But what about the government of Canada?
We continue to we have resources. China's our second largest, our third largest market. It will continue to grow. It'll continue to be a huge, very important market for Canada. We cannot decouple from the growth of China.
Yeah. So you said second, third. Are you?
So it's the second country, and the third if you count the EU as one market.
Okay, fair enough then. Just another. This is an odd question, or this is a. How does the department refer to Taiwan? Is it the Republic of China? Is it Beijing? Is Taipei? What's the official line on Taiwan? Is it free China?
Canada has a one China policy.
And how do you refer to Taiwan? You don't refer
Taiwan
to it as
an economy. Taiwan is an economy.
An economy. So the Americans refer to it as their unsinkable battleship, and we refer to Taiwan as the economy.
Taiwan is an economy for us.
No, it is an economy.
It's a trade part. It's a trade.
No. I'm sorry. In a document, you don't refer to the economy. What do you call Taiwan? I'm just curious to know how to refer to this piece of real estate.
We refer to Taiwan as Taiwan.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Verhul, I'm just curious as we talk about trade with nations around the world. You described a number of obstacles to what we would see as the path towards a free trade. The use of state-owned enterprises. There was a list of challenges. Is it fair to say that if those disappeared, that would perhaps smooth the way to a trade agreement, but it would also mean a very different China and not the China we know today?
Well, I think that when we're examining the potential for a free trade agreement with China, we're looking at the China of today. And I think that we've been involved in a number of free trade negotiations in recent years, some quite large ones. And it's always a matter of trying to match up how your partner's economy matches up to your economy. Yeah. In the case of China, it's much more complex than it was with the European Union or with Trans-Pacific Partnership members or within North America, because China does have a different type of economy. Yeah. They have their state-owned enterprises, which are very hard, very difficult to find out exactly how they operate. Difficult to figure out what kind of disciplines we could put on that, what kind of transparency obligations so we know what's going on. They also have a high volume of subsidies that they provide to certain industries. We would want to address that.
Let me just ask you. Oh, I thought it.
Sorry about that. No, I have 5 minutes.
Okay,
a little bit over 5 minutes
All right,
now.
thank you.
Sorry. Now we have. I understand Ms. Zan and Mr. Fragis-Caddis are going to split their time. Ms. Zan?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I come from Nova Scotia, representing Cumberland, Colchester, the northern region there. And Nova Scotia remains Canada's leader in seafood exports with over $2 billion in exports, as you probably know. That's 29% of Canada's total seafood exports. And while the U.S. remains our largest market, China is our second. In fact, our seafood exports have increased by 36% in the last few years. However, the outbreak of the coronavirus, with over 4,500 confirmed cases in China, has now put the brakes on Nova Scotia's lobster sales and shipments just within the last few days. There's been a sharp drop, which means that the price at the wharf has also dropped from around $10 a pound to around $8. Has there been any discussion yet about what, if anything, Canada can do, what the government can do to deal with this problem if it continues? And is it happening to other Canadian exports to China?
I was actually, Mr. Speaker,
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman, I was actually, I'm sorry?
Oh,
can you hear me?
I wasn't sure if your mic was on. Thanks.
I was actually in Halifax the day before yesterday. I met with some of the companies there and the government of Nova Scotia. And Nova Scotia has been very successful in developing a relationship with China, as you've said. So yes, we have heard that the certain lobster shipments have been impacted. And we have people at our embassy in Beijing, and notably a representative from CFIA, looking into what is happening. It's difficult to reach officials responsible for customs during the Chinese New Year, but he's doing his best. We're not entirely sure if this is a new regulation yet, or whether it has to do with markets for seafood and live food products being closed, restaurants being closed, transportation and cold supply chains being disrupted, and people just staying at home and not going to markets and not buying, restaurants being closed, Chinese New Year celebration having been shut down, and so on. So logically, this has an impact on imports of certain food products from Canada, especially those like live lobster that are associated with Chinese New Year.
Thank you. Am I going to pass over to my colleague
if you wish.
Here? I just wanted to one last question though: is it affecting other exports, or is it just the lobsters?
So, to our knowledge, no other exports have been affected yet. But again, given the difficulties China is going through right now, it's not unlikely that there will be some disruptions.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add, just a clarification, because there are some other commodities that we are picking up notional things on the meat side. Again, because restaurants are closed, the streets are, as you've seen on TV, so the demand on some of the imports are softening, and we are talking to the meat industry, and it does look like there may be a slowdown as we people assess the situation.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to all of you for being here today. If one accepts that the tensions between the U.S. and China are having a deep impact on the Canada-China relationship, as I think we should accept, then one could be forced to look in other directions. It's been suggested, for example, by former Ambassador David Mulrooney, that, and to put it in his words, getting China right requires getting Asia right. And from there, the implication is that we ought to look at East and Southeast Asia, expand relations with Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, Australia, the countries of the ASEAN bloc, for example, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. I know that we have, though, TPP in place. We are moving in that direction, but to what extent, and I'll put it to Mr. Berhu, to what extent are we doing that? And can we do that even more as a way to sort of hedge and protect Canadian interests when we end up caught in between two superpowers and their disputes? Yeah, there you go. I've left you a lot.
Oh, okay. I'll try to be quick. Yes, we are actively engaged in trying to ensure that we have good access, good relationships to those other markets. Because of CPTPP, we do have free trade relations with Japan. We have the same with Vietnam. We have a separate agreement with South Korea. We are exploring a potential agreement with the ASEAN countries. So we're deeply involved in trying to expand our footprint in Southeast Asia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fredriskatis, and thank you very much to the witnesses. I know we all appreciate your testimony here today, and thank you for coming. Before we close, we're actually going to have a discussion, but would colleagues like to go in camera for discussion on future business? Carry on publicly. Fine. So we'll suspend for a moment while we excuse our guests. Back to order. Thank you very much. A couple of issues for us to talk about. One is, of course, what the regular meeting time of the committee is to be, which has been a bit of a challenge to work out. And the second thing is, when does the subcommittee want to meet to consider the work plan? So those are the two questions that I have in mind for this, which I hope will be a brief discussion. And I'm going to I've been asked to reiterate, of course, that Tuesday from 10 to noon, we'll have the briefing with Consular Affairs and Justice, and then on Wednesday of next week from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m., the briefing with Ambassador Barton. So, anything else in terms of? Yeah, but
Chair, that's still 5:30 to 7:30. Did you say? Yeah.
what we need to discuss.
Yeah, okay. So that, as colleagues will what we recall, the slots that were available for special committees were 11, on Mondays 11 to 1 or 5:30 to 7:30, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 5:30 to 7:30, Friday mornings, 8:45 to 10:45 a.m. Mr. Oliphant?
I'm just going to suggest that once these initial briefings are done and the ambassador has spoken, we think there should be a good subcommittee meeting to then assess, review witnesses and all that. I just don't think we can do it before then. The other issue is that we have a preference on this side. It's a preference, it's not a demand, it's a preference to meet once a week for 3 hours as opposed to twice a week for 2 hours each, with the option of having occasional meetings added to that. But our default would like to be one meeting 3 hours a week because of committee responsibilities. Almost all our members have a second committee that they're on, and so we are trying to balance that. We feel we need to keep it within the times allotted by the House for special committees. We think that on occasion we could do an extra evening meeting, but our preference is to meet on Monday, and our preference is to have a 3-hour meeting.
And members will recall, of course, that if we are outside the times that I indicated a moment ago, we might have a problem with television. With being televised, of course, we also talked about the fact that we can always be webcast. So, Mr. Workington.
Yeah, I understand the joy of being a chair, trying to figure out what works for everybody. I think we probably have to stick to the 2-hour increments for a couple of reasons. One is scheduling in terms of the technical aspects, but there's also 2-hour increments is what other committees have. And so if we start overlapping into other committees, then it makes it that much more difficult for our members to schedule to be able to attend. So our preference is probably two meetings, 2-hour meetings. If there is a way, I mean, we're not adamantly opposed to the 1 3-hour meeting, but I think it probably is just it's that much more difficult to plan this.
That members want to discuss in subcommittee next week, and I guess either way, I need to when that should happen. When should we have that meeting?
Let's plan. I'm available starting Monday, but if we'd like to have an initial subcommittee meeting on Monday, just to simply nail that down, and then we'll have another subcommittee meeting to talk about the work.
What time on Monday do you have in mind?
Monday morning works fine. Monday afternoon works fine.
Mr. Bergeron's got an afternoon, l'après-midi? Non. Ça fonctionne pas?
The afternoon doesn't work?
Mr. Harris? Mr. Bergeron? Oui.
Mr. Bergeron. Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say that I agree with the first part of what Mr. Oliphant said, and I disagree with the second part. I believe that perhaps we should hold the committee meeting for the second series of briefings, and then to have the meeting with the ambassador, and then have our subcommittee meeting afterwards, which could happen Thursday morning or Thursday afternoon for my part. And I prefer 2 meetings for 2 hours rather than 1 meeting for 3 hours. And for me, it is much more difficult to meet on Mondays.
At the subcommittee, and I guess the question is, Mr. Bergeron has suggested Thursday morning or afternoon for the subcommittee, as opposed to perhaps Monday or Tuesday. Mr. Harris.
Yes, I prefer the two meetings instead of one. I looking at Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and the committees meeting, and as mentioned, some people are on 2 committees, including myself, meeting both Tuesday and Thursday. The exact slots I don't know, but it seems to be with all consideration to Mr. Bergeron's position, Monday seems, for me at least, is wide open, and I'm willing to come here to be here for that, whatever time of day it is. If we can do it in the afternoon or whatever else can accommodate Mr. Bergeron's, potentially accommodate Mr. Bergeron's situation, I'd be happy to do that. So that's really all I have to add to this. But I agree with waiting till after Mr. Barton speaks to have a subcommittee meeting.
So is there I'm hearing Thursday morning, is that, at least from one member, is Thursday morning a good time for a subcommittee to meet, that is, and try to work out an ongoing time or times for regular meetings?
Be fine. What I would ask also is that there be a meeting of the whips to look at the convention that we have around special meetings, special committee times. I mean, it's our whips have worked that out over many years, and we think that there needs to be respect of members. We work here Monday to Friday. That is our reality. And we would like to respect the fact that other committees have times that are required. We have members in all the time slots of all the other committees, so we would like that respect. We think that probably is a whips discussion to make sure that we are in agreement on that, and then also have our subcommittee meeting.
So that's a request to the whips to deal with. In terms of next Thursday, avant que je vais à Monsieur Bergeron, et c'est pour lui aussi, à quelle heure jeudi matin et pour combien de temps? 1 heure?
What time on Thursday? An hour, 2 hours? Mr. Bergeron? The time is not important. I'll be there at the time that you wish for us to meet, whether it's for 2 hours or other. I'm fine with it. I just want to comment on what Mr. Oliphant has said. I do not believe, and perhaps I am mistaken, I do not believe it's relevant to consult the whips, because there's already schedules that are set aside for special committee meetings that don't go into conflict with regular committee meetings. Like most of my colleagues, I also sit on another standing committee. I do not believe that there's any conflict between the schedules of the standing committees and the schedules for special committees. I think we just need to find 2 spots for the special committees, and everything should be fine then.
Mr. Fredskatos.
No, I was just going to say on the point about consulting the whips, I think it makes sense because this is a special committee. They have the institutional knowledge. I certainly know that on our side, the member that the official that we worked with from the whips office, she's been here since the 1990s, and I think there's plenty of experience on all sides where we can tap into that institutional knowledge to figure out how we can plan these meetings from a logistical perspective. I think we'd be very wise to go back and consult them. I think that's a very reasonable suggestion.
I might not have been clear. Mr. Chair, I might not have been clear. My comment to consult the whips is if we are encroaching upon any other committee time. That's all.
Yeah, that's what
if we are staying within the times that have been agreed to over the years by parties for special committees, I have no trouble. But if somehow someone is suggesting that we should not be meeting on days that are allotted for that, that's my concern.
Self-committee at 8:45 next Thursday morning, Immigration Committee, but could we meet in subcommittee from 11 until 12? That I'm getting some nods and thumbs up. Mr. Harris is hoping to be able to join us.
Hoping to be able to come, yeah.
Very good. I want to remind members to send your preliminary prioritized list of witnesses for the first wave, as some have said, to the clerk by before 5 p.m. tomorrow. And I guess I'll look forward to subcommittee meeting at 11 a.m. on Thursday, and of course the other meetings that I already mentioned. And with that, thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.
you.